Hey everybody, Mr. Fugay here. For this video, this is a short extension of our original video which talks about point, line, and angle vocabulary. The last chunk of this video talks specifically not about vocab terms, but about how we can perform measurements with line segments as well as measures of angles. So let's talk about that. So when we talk about the measure of a line segment, we're more or less specifically talking about the numerical length of that actual segment. Sorry, wasn't legible there. So for example, if we talk about this segment here, and we'll call this XY, okay? We can label this shape. This shape is a segment. And the way we would label the shape is like we did in the previous video. We would write XY and put the segment bar above it. So this is an indication for its shape. Now, if we're talking specifically about the length of this segment, let's say the length here was 10 inches. This is now referring to something a little bit different. So what we want to do here is a number indicating the distance between the endpoints given in some linear unit of measurement. Now, there's all sorts of different measurements we could use. Inches, we could use feet, we could use miles. If we want to go to the metrics, we could talk about kilometers, we could talk about meters, and etc., etc., etc. So the notation we want to use here is, well, I guess I should call, instead of AB in my drawing here, I'm using XY. What we would do is we would say XY is equal to 10. And notice the biggest difference here is that there are no bars. We're not writing a bar above it because we're not talking about the shape. We're talking about the distance between these two endpoints. So that's some of the most important things we want to look at here in this example. There's actually nothing to write over here because I already drew it on the left-hand side. And the last measurement we're going to talk about is how we measure angles. So measure of an angle is going to be primarily done in what's called degrees. Now later on in the course, especially if you are in the honors geometry course, we're going to learn another way to measure angles, which is called a radian. In fact, radians came before degrees, but degrees are easier to understand. Degrees are derived from the idea that an angle can be measured in a unit of a circle. And an entire revolution of a circle is actually going to be 360 degrees. Now, if you wonder why a full circle is 360 degrees, this is a good thing. You can jump on Google or YouTube, but in a very short, simple, not fully cited meaning here, there's 365 days in our calendar year. And thousands and thousands of years ago, when all of this stuff was being discovered, the 360 was meant to be a representation of what they thought at the time was an approximation for an entire year, which is, by the way, when the Earth completes an entire revolution around the sun. So that's where the 360 comes from. So what happens is, because of that, let's take a look at an angle. So if I label this angle, and once again, we'll call it, well, let's just use GO again, G, E, and O. So what we do is that we measure how much of that circle goes from one ray to the other. So you see this thing right here is an arc. And that arc is a visual representation of how much of this circle that we're going through. So that angle measurement then is going to be considered what our degree measure is going to be. So let's pretend that this arc here is going to equal 70 degrees. So that's approximately, oh, I don't know, this much of a circle, because 90 degrees is a quarter of a circle. So officially, it's a number indicating the degree of rotation between the sides of an angle. An angle is measured using what's called a protractor. There are many different ways. We'll talk about that moving forward. The notation for this is we're still going to say angle. In this case, let's scribble this out. We'll call this M, and then this is angle GEO. And what we're saying is that this angle is equal to 70 degrees. Now, this little M in front is nothing more than to tell you that we're talking about the measure of. So it's literally just a translation for measure of angle GEO, and that's where our 70 degrees comes from. So these are the two most important ways for us to be able to do measurements in geometry. Make sure you take some time to look this up and also to look at the specific ways we need to label it when we're talking about measurements. Hope this video was helpful, and that will conclude our 1.1 section on point, lines, and angle vocabulary.